Hi guys, welcome to Delaware Studios. Let's get to talk about RxJAVA on Android. RxJAVA is one of the most discussed libraries for enabling reactive programming in Android development. It started as the go-to framework for simplifying concurrency and asynchronous tasks inherent in mobile programming. RxJAVA simplifies development by raising the level of abstraction around threading. As a developer, you don't worry too much about the details of how to perform operations that should occur on different threads. RxJAVA core comprises of the observable, observer, and operator. Let's integrate RxJAVA in an Android application. We'll be using observable objects as part of the network stack, in which we'll look at Retrofit, an HTTP client open source that has built-in bindings with RxJAVA to interact with GitHub's API. Specifically, we'll create an app that presents all the start repositories for a user given a GitHub username. Let's get started. Diving straight into Android Studio, we have to set up the dependencies to integrate RxJAVA with Retrofit into your application. Firstly, we point out the Retrofit 2, this is the second version of Retrofit, the adapter, because we have some inbuilt bindings of RxJAVA with Retrofit, RxJAVA 2.0.2. Also, the converter JSON that converts all our Java key value pairs into an object. And Retrofit itself, we have the Reactive X for the Rx Android, specifically for Android application, with RxJAVA, which is the core. Well, we'll get to use the observable, the operators, and some other functionalities. So after this, you sync Gradle and set up your application. So we're going to be using the GitHub API to pull some data and get the start repository of that particular user with the repository name and some other details around it. Heading straight to the layout files, we have the activity mail where we're going to have a list, or you could have a recycler view. We'll be using a list for simplicity, and also the item. Let's get to brush down the activity main. Basically, these are a linear layout where we have the list view set up. Right there, you can see that wrapped around, called an ID with the list view repos, and another linear layout which is actually going to take an input text, which is the edit text, and the button to trigger the search. So you have that very simple. And let's look at the item GitHub repo. That's actually going to be the items that will be displaying right on the list view. Wrapped around the relative layout, a text view which depicts the repo name and the description with the language that is actually used in the source code, and the number of stars that the repo has accumulated. So you have that also speeded out. Let's head straight to the core where we talk about the classes. Firstly, we need to create a client and service. If you're used to Retrofit, you should know how to set up that. I'm also going to go through that. The client, where you get to set up the JSON converter factory, and also the base URL. We have the base URL pointing at the API github.com. This is a public API which doesn't need an API key from GitHub. We have the instance of the GitHub client and also the GitHub service, an object from the GitHub service class. The constructor right here where you get to set up your JSON builder to set the field naming policy. That's a lowercase with underscores. Cool. And you have to build up the retrofit. You pass in the GitHub base URL over here, which you set up. You add the call to the adapter factory, where you're going to call the RxJAVA adapter factory, because we're going to be using the bindings, the inbuilt adapter from Retrofit, which is predominantly to RxJAVA. And the JSON factory right there, you build that up, you create that, set that up. Now this is an instance of the GitHub client, which we have right there, and very importantly, the get start repo. this is actually going to be the object that will be called. And if you notice, an observable is being attached to this, which is actually going to come in a list, in a Java util list. And you have the GitHub repo, which is the model, where you get to have the name, the description, you set the get and set methods right there. This is the model, passing that into the generic, and you have a list of the GitHub repo, where you're going to point to the get start repo, and you need the username. There's a parameter which you actually need to pass into this particular method. So this is an observable that actually source for data. So that's that setup. Let's quickly look at the GitHub repo, which is the model for this application. Basically, we have the ID, the name, the URL, the description, language, and the count, which is actually going to be the stars. So those are the values we needed, and a constructor to actually set them up. So it's actually going to listen to all those parameters I've listed out earlier, and it's going to set them into those variables which were created up here. So cool. So you have that set up. A quick peep into the GitHub service. This is the endpoint. We have the base URL right there from the client, and now the service is going to actually, this is where you have to pass in which type of data call you're pointing at. Either you're using get, post, put, delete, and so on. So you have that set up. Firstly, here, the get method, we are trying to fetch data from the GitHub API or the GitHub backend or the GitHub database, which is pointed to the users. And this user it's actually it's dynamic. It's actually, you need a name passed in here. So that's actually going to be passed in from the text, and we have to populate it. That's why we have a wildcard around it, or let's say we have a bracket around that. And the start, we're pointing at the start, the number of start that the repository has. We still have an observable, which are pointing at the get start repositories, which we have right there in the GitHub client. Cool. And the path is the user, which is the point of change, and the username will actually replace that particular curly brace. So you have that set up. So that's the endpoint to the API we actually started with from the client. And then straight to the main activity, where we get to actually call the full network capability. This extends the app compact activity, we all know, and we created an object from the repo adapter. We're going to actually have a repo adapter that will extend the base adapter, which we're actually going to use to bind data to the view. And it's subscription, because you have to subscribe to a service when you're dealing with RxJAVA. You have to have a subscription right there. So you have an object also. A list view, where you initialize the list view and set the adapter to the object of the list view. You have that set up. You also initialize the text, which is actually going to listen to text values passed or typed into there. And the button search, once you trigger the button beside the text, what's going to happen, you set an on-click listener to that, where you need to override the on-click method. So a kind of validation to make sure that the text is not going to be empty. You don't have to just leave it empty and strike the search. Nothing's going to be done. It's just going to return nothing. So if the text util is now empty, that's the value here, is going to trigger the get start repos. So passing in the username you actually passed into the text. So that's actually going to trigger the method. Now we have the onDestroy method. When you actually destroy this activity, or when you close down this app, what's going to happen? You need to unsubscribe from the subscription, which is actually listening to, because there's no essence to actually open up subscription when your app is not even running, or your app is closed or probably destroyed or in the foreground. So you have to actually undo that. Now let's get to look at the get start repos that pass in the username, and you have to firstly call the GitHub instance to the subscription, because you've actually listened to subscription. and you get the start repos. This is actually a method from the service or from the client. We have it from the client, and you pass in the username. What are you subscribing on? The schedulers IO. These are inbuilt in RxJAVA. We have the Android schedulers built on the main thread, and we have the scheduler itself. This is actually going to schedule this particular call, so it's not going to actually run concurrently on a UI thread. That's what that is doing. It's actually going to specify a different thread for it, so you don't have to go through the stress of creating your thread and maintaining the thread. RxJAVA is actually going to make that happen, and you can open different connections or different threads at a time, so that's not going to actually block each other. That's the essence of this library. You could start another asynchronous task after the end of one async task, so you don't have to wait for one to finish before you start another. The threads are going to be parallel, which won't block or meet each other. You have that set up, the observe on the schedulers, and you're going to subscribe. What is subscribing at? Which is the list we're expecting from the model to actually bind those values to. We're expecting a list, which is the get start repos, and you need to override three methods: the uncompleted, on error, and on next. That's an iteration. When you say the next, it's trying to iterate and spit out data, so it's actually passing that. And uncompleted, you could just log that. You don't really need to spit that out to your UI. And on error as well, you also need to get the cause of the error, and you put that in the console so that you'll be able to debug. And on next, that's a success. We need the GitHub repos, which is the list array. Cool. And now you need to be setting an adapter. You set the adapter to the values you had from this list. So that's what is happening. Adapter, which is actually the GitHub repo adapter, and you're going to actually set the repos. There's a method right there in the adapter class, which you're going to be looking, and you set the values to that adapter. So the adapter is actually going to have some values to work with, some data to work with. So that's just what we're going to do. The last class that we'll be looking right there is going to be the GitHub repo adapter to bind data and also to accept different calls. This extends the base adapter, and it's a private list which you instantiate to an array list. You're trying to modify that to an array list called the GitHub repos, and the get count to know the size of the list of the utility list you're having, and the get item to know each position of each of those items. So that's what that is doing. And also to get item with an ID. I think we've covered all this in the course of different tutorials in my channel. If you're finding it kind of clumsy, this is going to be very useful when you're trying to extend more. Probably you want to create a detail page, or you want to trigger an intent. So that's actually going to be able to bind to each of the item in the list. Cool. And we get the view. Because we're actually using the list view, it's actually going to work out this way. The view order for the GitHub repo, and you set that based on the item position. You return the view. Now we have the set GitHub repos that was called from the main activity. What's this one doing? If you should notice, it's just adding all the repo to the GitHub repos, which is actually the list. Can you see it there? It's just populating the list. It's populating a list. In the course of calling, let's look at it one more time. In the course of setting the GitHub on next, which is actually iterating, so it's just adding that values, it's adding those values, the iterated values, down to the list which we have here, which is the GitHub repos, with the help of this helper method, which is the set GitHub repos, which is basically just adding all of those values. And you need to notify dataset changed, because changes can happen, and addition can be done. Even probably you've had 10 lists, it could be reduced to 5, and it could be added more. So that should be a notified dataset change on your adapter. You create the view, which is actually going to point to the list item, which is the item GitHub repo. You have that set up. Now we're going to bind those views, which we've actually done. And this is an inner class, which is the view order. We always know that. And you need to initialize the views that you needed. The text view for the repo name, for the repo description, and the language used, and for the stars that you accumulated right there from the repositories. So that's just how that works, and you have that set up. And let's get to look at the binding aspect. So you set the GitHub repo. So that's what that is going to do. Now it's going to set the text to the value of the name, to the value of the description, to the value of the language, and also for the count. So you have that set up. So this is the binding, because we are actually using an adapter out of the box from the widget adapter, and it's also pointed to list view. Is kind of different. If you're using recycler view, just the same flow. The way you do it, you need to set an helper method that continues to populate data to the list which you've instantiated to an array list, and you get it spitted out to the UI. So cool. Can you see the way RxJAVA has been able to help us do the doing background that we usually do using the async tags? When you call on the exit tags, and you have to do in background to actually make the network calls. At the same time, once data has been gotten back, you need to set that to the adapter. And this can get complex using async tags when you need to continue another async tags, or you need to listen or to do another background call after the end of one async tags. That's where RxJAVA comes in. RxJAVA is actually going to simplify this. Just set up another subscription on another listener, and that's once completed, it's actually going to populate the UI. Get it? You bind it appropriately. So you could set up different subscription, but on destroy, on close of the activity, you need to actually unsubscribe from those subscription, so that the other aspect of the other apps could use some resources from the device. So it's actually not going to entangle alone with your application. That's the best way to actually handle this. So cool, we've been able to shed a little light on RxJAVA. I will implore you to read deeper into it. It's quite useful. It's the elite way to develop mobile application using Android and some other aspects, using the reactive programming into Android application. So we're going to actually stop from here, and the manifest is just going to be simple. We need to add the internet permission, because we're actually calling an API which is right there sitting in the cloud. So thank you guys for hanging out with me throughout this tutorial, and I hope you're going to enjoy using RxJAVA, and you come up with a robust application using this library. And I'll be sharing the source code as well to my GitHub account, and we'll also be leaving you with a screencast of this demo. Thank you one more time. Have a lovely day. Bye bye.